Yeah, in Senegal too, I think Laura already mentioned it, but I want to say some about that too. It's about treating about food security, but as she said, in some area in Senegal, women's cut forests to plant some agrofuels plant could untie like 6-8% of incomes, population incomes, and especially women. They get all the nuts and all other fruits from this forest, and it that that revenue, that income is estimated by the forest department is around 68% of the total income, population income in some area in Senegal. Um, what can I say else is a new program in Senegal 2007, but our concern in Senegal as a civil society organization is not to to follow the same example of expropriation of small farmers. So that's why we call the government to be cautious and to assess all the issues about agrofuels. So that's why we've been organizing as an alliance, civil societies alliance to be a guide and to monitor all things going on about agrofuels production in Senegal, and try to bring the government to put in place a regulatory framework and to stop all agrofuels production at the moment until we have an assessment and a regulatory framework in Senegal.
Well, it seems like we're only learning the damages in the aftermath. Originally, it may have seemed like a great investment. You know, we bring investment into our countries, but now we're seeing that it's displacing farmers and so on. So, given the strong correlation between increased food price percentages and biofuel production, why the stubborn investment? I mean, I think the IMF came out with a study in 2008. It says that although biofuels still account for 1.5% of the global liquid fuel supply, they accounted for almost half of the increase in the consumption of major food crops in 2006, 2007. And most of that has to do with subsidies for ethanol production in the United States. Mm-hmm. So whether these numbers vary, whether the percentage of how much biofuel production affects food prices, I mean, it's still fairly high, but yet we continue to invest in biofuels and we are moving in that direction. So in your opinion, why? Why aren't we doing something else?
Well, that's why we are here visiting Washington, and before we were also in Brussels visiting the European Parliament, because we are aware that it's the setting of targets to switch from petroleum to agrofuels is the main cost that is pushing these enterprises in our countries to grab land. So we think that the governments in the developed countries must have a more profound and complete assessment on the impacts of this production, because developed countries are not capable of producing agrofuels up to their needs. Sure. So they are grabbing land in developing countries with all these impacts we just talked about. So in the first place, we are trying to say to the governments, to the states in developed countries, not to set these targets. That in one place, and then the other, that it it must be considered the whole cycle, producing cycle of the agrofuels, because there is been a change in land use that affects most developing countries, and within the developing countries, the poorest people. So that is what we are trying to stand up.
One thing that I also wanted to talk about, if you could please talk about the advantage and necessity of having small farmers. We're moving, like you mentioned earlier, for example, was dependency on imports. And if you look a few years back, that wasn't the case. A lot of developing countries were self-sustainable, and now we're moving as we're importing more and more and more, and now becoming more dependent on aid and etc. So what is the necessity and the value in having small farmers in your communities?
In Guatemala, for example, we used to be a self-sufficient country in terms of food a decade ago, and we have lost this capacity. We have lost 80% of our wheat production, and being one country which our main grain is corn. Right now, we are importers of yellow corn from the United States, and also we are a culture. The majority of people are Mayan indigenous, and they are a corn culture. So this affects us a lot in a lot of dimensions. And what we are trying to say is that the small farmers have a very important role in our economy, because they are the ones that produce food for all the population in Guatemala, most of the population, and even they are exporting some of their crops. But besides that, it is a culture based in the agriculture, and people have the right to decide what they want to produce and how they want to produce it. And the state, Guatemalan state, has a history where all the laws have been stated to help the big producers and to reinforce the exportation activity. So it is time to turn the focus of the state toward the small producers and give them the technical and financial aid in order to be able to keep their production. We are also promoting within the government of Guatemala rural development law that focus to these small producers.